hello, welcome back to the channel. It's me, Emma the Cat Lady, and you join me here at Caesar's tent in Fallout New Vegas. So I think I'd like to focus Wasteland Biographies a bit on the Legion, because there's a lot more to them than that first might appear, and I think there's some really interesting stories and amongst the kind of lore around Caesar's Legion. So we're here at Caesar's tent, so Caesar's there's Lopez and Coulter, and some fire. So today we're going to talk about the burned man, Joshua Graham. It's high time that we talk about some of these more high profile people, and I think Joshua Graham is a fascinating character. He's led quite an interesting life, and he's a very complicated man with a lot of interesting beliefs and kind of internal personal conflicts. So it also shows us a bit about how religion has kind of persisted into the post-apocalyptic world and the impact that faith and belief can still have on people's lives.
Some of the slaves have been spreading stories about
So it was originally written by Josh Sawyer for the cancelled Fallout 3 project Van Buren, if you've ever heard of that one. That was one that was in the works at Black Isle Studios before it was cancelled in 2003, and then the Fallout intellectual property was sold on to Bethesda. So it was going to be top-down isometric, same as Fallout 1 and Fallout 2. And the Legion and the concept of the Legion and Joshua Graham was written for that, so it was then adapted. A lot of the kind of lore that was created around that and the Van Buren project was then actually put into Fallout New Vegas because the developers were largely the same people. So, we can talk a bit about his early life. So, Joshua Graham was born in New Canaan, which is a settlement in the remains of Ogden in Utah. So he was raised by the community there. They were practicing Mormons, and he proved to be quite skilled with languages. And he became a missionary, using his linguistic skills to communicate with the tribals. And so he joined up with the Followers of the Apocalypse, an organisation that we do know from the classic Fallout games as well, who are kind of medics and they help people and they kind of approach different groups and basically kind of peaceful and trying to kind of help the remains of humanity survive. So he joined up with them. They were on an expedition into the Grand Canyon. So they travelled towards Arizona to meet up with Bill Calhoun and Edward Sallow before they met with the local tribes. So they reached the Blackfoot tribe and things seemed to be going really well until the mood shifted and they found themselves being held as hostages instead. Joshua Graham blames himself for this, thinking that he mistranslated something and caused some kind of offence. But while they were held captive, they discovered that the Blackfoot tribe were at war with several other tribes in the area and they were losing. So despite Calhoun's protests, Edward Sallow used his knowledge of warfare and strategy to teach them tactics and lead them to victory. They made him leader of the tribe and Graham became a field commander. So they then spent 30 years conquering tribes across Utah, Colorado, Arizona and New Mexico under the flag of the bull. That is right, this is Edward Sallow right here. He now goes by the name Caesar, or Kaiser, depending on how you want to pronounce it. And he was a well-read man, obviously very fascinated by the history of the Roman Empire. And Joshua Graham became his right-hand man, known as the Malpais Legate. So Malpais means badlands or land that's covered with basaltic lava, and Legate is the term for general. So he's the general of the Badlands, which is a description of the southwest of the US. That term was used by the Spanish, I believe. But the lava part is kind of prophetic, and we'll get into that. So what we'll do is Caesar kind of gets annoyed if you mention him, but we can have a chat to Lucius here.
You've proven yourself to be a true friend of the Legion. We have a safe house available to our agents in the Mojave. Here's the key.
Thank you.
It's an excellent place to rest and store extra equipment. In addition, one of our veterans, Atticus, visits the house every few days. While he's there, you can acquire items useful for stealthy operations against our enemies from him.
Yeah, so you can get stealth poise if you are friends with the Legion, but we can talk to Lucius and we can ask about the burned man.
The Burned Man was Caesar's advisor and general when the Legion was originally formed. The Burned Man led us to a disastrous defeat at the dam. On Caesar's orders, the Burned Man was covered in pitch by the Praetorian Guard, lit on fire, and cast into the Grand Canyon. Caesar has forbidden us from ever speaking his true name again. And so we simply refer to him as the Burned Man.
There we go. So quite a good summary there,
Wow.
Lucius. But yeah, so he became a legend. He was notorious for his brutality and his destructive nature, and leading the Legion to victory after victory after victory. And as we know, that they assimilated 86 tribes into the Legion, whether the tribes wanted to or not.
True to Caesar.
Yeah. So everything was going great, and then Joshua Graham's downfall begins with a dam. So a frumentarius by the name of Ulysses, named after Ulysses S. Grant, the president, not the figure from mythology. He discovered Hoover Dam and spotted the two-headed bear flag that was flying above it, which was obviously the NCR had occupied Hoover Dam. And Ulysses saw a nation that could rival the nation that Caesar was building. So he came back, told Caesar about it, and Caesar was like, nope, I need to have this dam, rallied the Legion, and sent Joshua Graham leading the Legion into battle for Hoover Dam. So this happened in 2277, so 4 years before Fallout New Vegas takes place. And unfortunately, Joshua Graham underestimated the NCR's forces and overestimated his own capabilities. So despite him having a reputation for being unkillable, because several assassination attempts by the 1st Recon and the NCR Rangers failed to take Joshua Graham down, so he probably got a bit arrogant and thought, no, we can definitely beat these guys, we're better than them. And unfortunately, he really underestimated Chief Hanlon of the NCR, so he predicted Joshua Graham's strategy and drew the Legion into a trap. So they assassinated some of the commanders in the Legion army to sow chaos, and basically forced them to kind of retreat into Boulder City. At which point the NCR cleared out as many of their people as they could and blew up the entire city, which forced the Legion to retreat from the dam. And if you've played through Fallout New Vegas, you've seen what's left of Boulder City. There's not much left standing there because of this, but they took out a lot of the Legion forces and pushed them to retreat. So, disgraced and ashamed, Joshua Graham returned to Caesar and was punished for his failure. As Lucius explained to us there, he was made an example of, to prove that anyone that failed Caesar would be punished no matter how high up the chain of command they were. So Graham was covered in pitch, which is tar essentially, set on fire and thrown into the Grand Canyon. So, against the odds, Joshua Graham survived this and he made his way back home to New Canaan. So we're going to head over to actually meet up with the man himself. Okay, so welcome to Zion Canyon. We're here at the Dead Horses camp. They all look like they're ready to fight something. I don't know if they're just training or if, well, these guys are just training. So we're here to speak to Joshua Graham himself. So he survived being set on fire and thrown into the Grand Canyon, which by all accounts he should have died in that process. But he survived and he crawled out of the canyon and slowly made his way home towards New Canaan. It was the only place left that he felt he could go, but he suffered severe burns all over his body, and unfortunately...
Hoi, Auslander Zuka Joshua Graham?
Yes.
You know our tongue. Smart, Auslander. Joshua in high place of cave. You show respect, Utman. Joshua is greatest warrior. You show him no respect. He show you thunder and fire.
Yep, so he's a great warrior, and if you respect him, he'll be nice to you, and if you don't, then he's gonna... Yeah, so fair enough. I'll behave.
You wise for Auslander.
Thank you. Yeah. So, yep, he's here with this tribe, and essentially what happened was that he suffered some pretty severe burns, so we'll see when we actually get to where he is, which is up here. There he is.
We should have given you a better welcome on your first visit to Zion. But from what I hear, the Whitelegs beat us to it. Whitelegs seem to be the only visitors we have these days, and I wouldn't have expected anyone from the Mojave to come looking for us. And you're a courier, no less. Not the one I was expecting, but I suppose he wouldn't have come with a caravan. I don't know if you were close to the other members of your group, but you have my sympathy. I pray for the safety of all good people who come to Zion, even Gentiles. But we can't expect God to do all the work.
There we go. So, yeah, there's a few interesting little tidbits in that there. So, he's aware of what happened when we arrived in Zion with the caravan and all the people got shot and we had to fight off the Whitelegs and everything. But you can see he's covered in bandages head to toe, basically, other than his eyes and his fingertips. So, he suffered some pretty severe burns. And one thing that he did discover is that he is immune to chems, which unfortunately includes the beneficial effects. So no painkillers that he could find helped for him to deal with the agony of these burns. So based on the pain, and we will get into asking him some questions about these things, but given that, you know, the pain that he feels is very extreme, it's excruciating every single day, so it's very likely to be kind of second degree burns. So if you're not aware, burns are classified by how deep into the different layers of the skin they go. So first degree burns are very superficial, just really into the epidermis, the outer layer of your skin. They tend to heal quickly. They are painful, but they tend to heal fairly quickly. Second degree burns kind of go through the epidermis into the dermis underneath. They take a longer time to heal, tend to leave scarring, are exceedingly painful. Third degree burns go full skin thickness, and that destroys the nerve endings in the skin. So the damage is worse and more life-threatening, but actually less painful because the capacity for pain has been destroyed by the burns. There is also fourth degree burns, which is where it gets right into tissue like muscle and bone underneath, so they're, you know, horrendously bad burns. But it means that all he can do to manage his injuries from this is to protect his skin with bandages, but they have to be changed daily to prevent infection. When the skin is burned and damaged that way, your skin, the main function of the organ, which is the skin, is to keep fluid in and keep bacteria out. Essentially, it's the first line of defence. So if you damage that barrier, bacteria can get in and cause infection, which could become very serious, especially in a world where hospitals and burn units and things aren't really available. And there's also risk of losing fluid and dehydration. So these are the things that mean that burns can be pretty deadly. So he has to change these bandages daily, and he describes the pain of exposing his skin to the air as being like the flames are still there. So it's excruciatingly painful, and he has to go through this process every day, which is going to be time consuming because you can see his whole body's covered in bandages. It's not something that's going to be done very quickly. Talk about fortitude. As someone that lives with pain on a daily basis, I know how debilitating it can be and how much it can impact your ability to function. I have, as I've mentioned, chronic health issues and chronic pain. I have an autoimmune disorder that attacks my joints, so I have had arthritis on and off since I was in my early 20s. And it can be very debilitating, and it can really have an impact on your day-to-day life. But the fact that he managed to crawl back to Utah with such severe burns, and he lives with this without the aid of painkillers, is pretty impressive. And it also did serve to fuel the flames of his legend as being someone that's unkillable. So the rumours of the burned man spread, while Joshua Graham was welcomed back to New Canaan with open arms like the prodigal son and rekindled his faith. He began to regret a lot of the things that he did under Caesar's command, but he ultimately chose to forgive Caesar. But rumours that he still lived did get back to Caesar eventually, which he's not very happy about. So he was very incensed at the news that Graham had survived his punishment, so he put out a kill on sight order, sent Frumentarii to find and kill him, and also, as we saw, forbade the speaking of Joshua Graham's name among the Legion. Anyone who did say it would be executed, which is something that's termed damnatio memoriae, condemnation of memory. So he's quite bitter about this man's continued existence. So, how do you know so much about what happened to me?
The dead horses are capable scouts. Nothing passes into or out of Zion without my hearing of it.
Okay, so I came here with the Happy Trails Caravan Company to make contact with the New Canaanites.
Happy Trails. I remember. They were good friends. I have bad news for your employers. New Canaan was destroyed, its citizens scattered. All because of the Whitelegs. And Caesar, of course. The Whitelegs want to join the Legion. Caesar's rite of passage is the destruction of the New Canaanites. Almost assuredly because of me. The good news is that we can help you find your way back. Daniel, one of the other New Canaanites, has made many maps of the region. The bad news is that we can't help you right now. Not with everything that's going on.
Okay, so yeah, there's quite a good summary. So this bitterness that Caesar held for Joshua led to Caesar ordering an attack on New Canaan. He sent Ulysses to equip the Whitelegs tribe and prepare them to attack the city. Many of the capable fighters of New Canaan weren't actually there at the time of the attack, so it was pretty much a slaughter, and those that survived sought refuge here in Zion Canyon and met with the local tribes. Because interesting, you can see his vest there, SLCPD, so that's going to be Salt Lake City Police Department. That's where he must have scavenged that from. So the dead horses and the sorrows welcomed the New Canaanites and integrated them, but the Whitelegs still continued to be a threat. And Joshua Graham and Daniel disagree on how to deal with the situation. He wants to fight and wipe out the Whitelegs. Daniel wants to flee Zion and find somewhere else. And that's kind of the whole plot of Honest Heart, so I'm not going to go into too much detail about that. You do have some options, and obviously the outcome depends on how you decide to handle this. So it's a very, very interesting story, and one thing, especially if you speak to the Sorrows, they conflate their deity, the father in the cave. I'll put a link to the video about Randall Clark, who is the father in the cave, because his story is fascinating. It's really, really interesting. I have covered that already, so I'll link that video for you here. But they basically took the teachings of the Mormons, the New Canaanites. They took that and conflated it with the father in the cave and kind of merged them together, rather than rejecting their old beliefs and converting. They've kind of integrated both belief systems together and kind of accepting that, which I think is really interesting. So what can I do to help?
You're a good neighbor to us. We all go through periods of darkness. In such times we can turn to the Lord, but it's good to have friends. Daniel and I need pre-war tools to help us navigate beyond Zion. Should we need to evacuate, these instruments will be vital to us. Normally, we would have some of the dead horses or sorrows look for them. But many pre-war buildings in the valley are taboo. They won't go inside.
Yeah. So basically, the tribals don't go into any of the kind of man-made pre-war buildings. They don't believe they believe they're cursed, which is interesting. So why don't you do it?
We are responsible for leading and protecting the sorrows and dead horses. They are smart people, but not as worldly as you or I.
Okay.
I am preparing the dead horses for war, and Daniel is preparing the sorrows for other things.
Okay, I will see what I can do.
Thank you. Follow Chalk can help you find your way around the valley. He's inexperienced, but he knows enough of our language to ignore the taboos about pre-war buildings.
There we go. So, yeah, he's asking us to go and collect some stuff and go and see Daniel, and Follows Chalk is going to help us. So I'm hoping that now I can...
Welcome back. can I do for you?
Yeah, so now we've done that, we can ask him quite a few things. So, what did you say about a courier? Who were you expecting?
Caesar would never admit this openly, but he knows that I'm alive. I've killed enough of his frumentari and assassins that have come looking. I've heard one of them travels the Mojave as a courier. Most of Caesar's agents meet a fitting end in NCR territory, but maybe this one survived.
So, yeah, he's talking about Ulysses, who, again, is a fascinating character, so I definitely want to talk about him at some point, because I think he's very interesting as well. And then you can ask, pray God, what you're talking about, so...
I am a New Canaanite. We believe we are the heirs of a spiritual tradition, given to our ancestors thousands of years ago. We have made and kept covenants with our Lord God to honor his laws. In exchange, we are promised eternal salvation after this life. A day will come when our Lord returns to judge us all. Until then, we must honor his laws and start others along the path of salvation if we can. That's why we trade with others and work the tribes. We have more than food and medicine to offer. Good news is our most valuable commodity.
Yeah, so he is, he's still practicing his beliefs, and he rekindled his faith after his experiences with Caesar. So he's kind of back to his missionary work, essentially. So, yeah, that sounds like a good deal.
In a world filled with misery and uncertainty, it is a great comfort to know that, in the end, there is light in the darkness. Every day we move closer to our judgment. We must do our best to walk in the footsteps of our Lord and teach others how to do the same. For many of us, the road is a difficult one, but the path is always there for us to follow, no matter how many times we may fall.
Yeah. So, again, he's kind of suggesting that his faith and his belief is something that is keeping him going, and it's helping him live his life with everything. So, very kind of interesting take. So, do you ever fall?
Every day. Some days are harder than others.
Okay. So another one actually that is interesting is the guns. So nice guns.
In the Great Basin and Colorado Plateau, all tribes are known for a specific weapon. Whitelegs are known for their big submachine guns, storm drums. They broke into an armory near Spanish Fork and have been using them for years. Of course, the dead horses have their wooden war clubs, and even the Sorrows have their Yao Guai gauntlets. This type of .45 automatic pistol was designed by one of my tribe almost 400 years ago. Learning its use is a New Canaanite rite of passage.
Yeah. So, I've got notes about this later on in my script, but yeah, so he says that the gun was designed by a member of his tribe 400 years ago, so that's well before the pre-war era, the kind of 2077 as well before that. So the gun is a reference to a gun that is the M1911, which was designed by John Browning, who lived in Ogden, Utah, and was a practicing Mormon. And New Canaan is, in the Fallout universe, is in Ogden, Utah. So that's, an interesting little reference of the gun that's very similar to the M1911. And Joshua Graham actually has a unique version of this gun called A Light Shining in the Darkness, which is a reference to Mormon teachings, and he did say something about a light in the darkness earlier there as well. So, it's all kind of connected to him being a Mormon and, being descended from the Mormons and things. So really quite interesting. So let's see, personal questions.
Right now, I'd like you to focus on helping Daniel. Maybe there will be time later.
Okay. So yeah, I think you have to do some more questions. And with you, that's fine. So I have to do some more questions, and then maybe I'll answer some personal questions. But Joshua Graham is a very complicated man. He is obviously very conflicted about his past, and is present as well. So he wants to protect the tribes here in Zion, but he doesn't want to see them forced to leave this place. He wants to fight and defeat the Whitelegs so that they can live here safely. He also does have a desire for vengeance, given what the Whitelegs did to his people. So as he did say, Caesar basically sent the Whitelegs into New Canaan and attacked and killed a bunch of the New Canaanites. So there is part of Joshua Graham that wants revenge for that, kind of understandably, but this is conflicting with the guilt he feels for his own sins and the atrocities that he's committed in Caesar's name. So he does have this strong need for true repentance as well. As he mentions, he wants to kind of find the path that's going to lead him to heaven, essentially, when he does finally pass away. So his violent nature and his need for revenge, but vengeance is never truly sated. And this creates a real internal conflict within this man, that, he's got two different sides to him that are vying for dominance, essentially. And the outcome for Joshua Graham is massively influenced by your actions in this DLC. So one option you have, as with pretty much all the NPCs in Fallout New Vegas, is you can kill him, and he actually does die that time. But if you do that, that triggers chaos in Zion, and basically you have to just fight your way out after that, and you don't really get a good resolution for anybody in that case. But it does allow Joshua Graham to rest in peace, so it's maybe not a bad thing for a man who has done horrible things but also suffers tremendously each day. He might then find some modicum of peace after that. But you can side with him and help him exterminate the Whitelegs, or you can side with Daniel to plan to flee Zion. But either way, you're going to wind up having to decide what to do with the leader of the Whitelegs, Salt Upon Wounds. Joshua Graham wants to see him executed, but you're the one that ends up making the decision, essentially. So if you do convince him to spare Salt Upon Wounds, he'll accept that. And this tempers his wrath and vengefulness most of the time, but he does seem to be more at peace with himself, according to the ending. If you let him execute Salt Upon Wounds, he remains pretty cruel, very militant, and shows no mercy, especially anyone that attacks his people, and he stays brutal, builds his own army that becomes feared across the wasteland. So, not great. But if you kill Salt Upon Wounds yourself, he ends up in a balance between the two. So he remains militant, but he doesn't revel in the brutality like he used to, and he's not as cruel as he used to be. So his wrath is somewhat tempered by this experience with you, but he's less inclined to show mercy to his enemies than he would be if you encouraged him to show mercy to Salt Upon Wounds. And really, a lot of the major characters that we encounter both in Fallout New Vegas and in the DLC are absolutely amazing, but Joshua Graham is a fascinating man. He's got a lot of conflict going on internally. He has a very complicated relationship with his faith and with his past, and it was originally written for Van Buren, so it's a concept that's obviously been in place for quite some time, and he does have some interesting connections and parallels. So he's mentioned in the base game before we ever meet him in this DLC, and he's got a number of kind of parallels with biblical figures, including Jesus, actually. So the name Joshua is a kind of anglicised version of the Hebrew name for Jesus, who was also executed by the Romans and then rose from death. In a way. So, there's an interesting little parallel there, that he was put in a situation where he should have died and then survived, so he kind of rose from what should have been certain death, and he was sent there by someone cosplaying as the Romans. Well, Jesus was obviously crucified by Pontius Pilate, and it was the Romans that were involved in that. And he does say at one point that he was baptised twice, once by water and once by fire, and his story of him kind of going astray and then crawling back home and being accepted is very much a parallel of the parable of the prodigal son. And so we've talked about his gun and the reference that has to the city where New Canaan came from, and the creator of the gun that's basically the 45 Auto, the M1911. And I think one of the most interesting things is that there's a quote that has spread far beyond the fans of Fallout New Vegas, and it's been used as an inspirational quote. There's a lot of people that don't even realise that the quote comes from a video game, which Joshua Sawyer is quite pleased about. So the quote in question: "I survived because the fire inside burned brighter than the fire around me." So that's quite a good inspirational quote from a man that has been through hell and back and has an immense amount of fortitude. He's got quite the history behind him, but his future depends on Courier 6. And this is something that I really love for Fallout New Vegas. The stories are brilliant, and the connections between the characters we meet is just fantastic. As I say, I've mentioned Ulysses several times. He's obviously involved with Joshua Graham. He's been involved. He was Frumentarius for the Legion, and various things. And I say his interest in history is something, and just this connection between all these characters, that it builds a really interesting world with a rich history and interesting stories to discover. And writing like this and having all these connections and all these, even little subtle connections, you have to give props to the writers for achieving that, and having, these stories that all interconnect in interesting ways. That there's there's a lot of work and a lot of talent that goes into that. I would say Suzanne Collins, who is the author of the Hunger Games series of books, is also extremely skilled in that manner. If you've read Sunrise on the Reaping, that book has consumed my soul since I read it. It's quite something. I don't know how the movie's going to be, but I think it's going to be quite an emotional ride. But writing in that way is, it's not an easy thing to do, and it is something that, as an aspiring author, I hope to be able to be a writer of that calibre one day. It's certainly something to work towards in my own writing endeavours. But it's something like, obviously I made a video about the main plot of Fallout 3, the video essay, which I had to re-upload yesterday because there was some footage that went missing. But the kind of concept that they had for Fallout 3 story was good. It just wasn't executed very well. Whereas Fallout New Vegas, and especially the DLC, which they probably had a wee bit more time and maybe already had plans for some of it. So, they've implemented it and they've pulled it off fantastically. And I think Joshua Graham's story is an especially good example of that. And he's a very interesting character, kind of definitely have a bit of sympathy for him, because, that kind of degree of burns, and if painkillers don't work, I can only imagine, and living with pain like that on a daily basis, it's not an easy thing to do. It really isn't, and it's something that I think people struggle to understand until they experience it for themselves. But it's not something that I would wish on my worst enemy, because it's a horrible way to live, and it can be very frustrating, because my chronic health issues have taken my entire life away from me. It's taken my career as a vet. It's really. It's really difficult, and the fact that he's still here, he's still fighting, and he's still defiant in the face of Caesar sending assassins after him all the time. I think that's fascinating. So hopefully you found all that very interesting. Let me know your thoughts below, and I would strongly recommend checking out the video about Randall Clark, the father in the cave. I say I've linked that for you anyway, and hopefully you come back for the next one. So that's me signing off for now, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.